Definitely the first time in this format. So thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. It feels rare. I know you're a Twitter regular, but a Twitter Spaces chat feels like a blessing. So we really appreciate you taking the time and look forward to getting into all sides of your work. These, obviously, Twitter Spaces, we've been, hopefully, everyone's had a chance to peruse the community at large, and I feel like they can become very amorphous and loud and noisy, but we really love to take the chance with these new arrivals here at Foundation to dive in deeply, go all the way down the rabbit hole with some of our favorite characters, and you're certainly at the top of the list. Someone who's been really active at Foundation and just super innovative within the entire Web3 landscape and beyond. I really can't thank you enough, but we know we've had a lot of crossover here in the past year, but taking it to this level, to allowing us to interview you at this degree is really appreciated. And yeah, thank you for jumping in.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you all for everything you've built. It's been a huge tool in the toolkit. So thank you.
Yes, and I think like your mind and how you adapt and find ways and inventions upon those tools has always been something really exciting. And what better time of year, time of market, time of our lives to talk about building and with someone who's so like versed with all these functions and ways in which to weave Web3 all together.
Hmm.
I guess we like to start off just by introducing. I'm Charles from Hero Foundation, working with creators and partners. If there's anything you'd like to start us off, I felt like just asking. I know that your work is from multitudinous sources that go from marketing to broadcasting to publishing to art. Certainly, I think at the core of it, all of it feels like art to me. But obviously, we will get into every side of you. I'm wondering if you would kick us off by just saying, what was your first introduction to art as a child, as
Hmm.
a preteen? Where did this all begin for you, just in terms of that specific vantage?
So I will start by saying like art was never really like I wasn't a kid that excelled in art class or anything like that, or thought I was going to be an artist when I was growing up. I actually got into the world of I guess producing art through very commercial means, basically realizing there's like a long story here, but I'll try and summarize it quickly. I at, I grew up in the UK, and at 16 years old in the UK, you're supposed to do work experience. So, like schools will get this list of um, places to send kids to get some experience of the working world, and on that list is like, you know, like every typical business you can imagine, supermarkets, like bus stations, like just the whole gamut. And I looked at that list, I was like, none of these look particularly interesting to me. My cousin at the time worked at a graphic design studio. I was like, that sounds like a fun way to spend a week. So I'll see if I can uh, I'll see if I can get the school to agree to send me there for a week, and figured that out. And I just remember thinking, sitting there for a week, like, wow, you can really make a living, like basically manifesting your imagination on a screen. And I was like, I think the task I had was like, I was into skateboarding at the time, and my brief for the week was like to come up with a skateboarding brand. And just remember walking away from that, like, and going back to school and being like, well, that seems like a very aspirational way to spend one's time when you graduate. So after that, I guess that's where the bug came from, of just kind of making things, being creative, and graphic design in particular. I think I was always a bit of a systems thinker. My dad's an engineer, so I was always around like a little bit of design thinking, building, fixing things, and I think that showed up a lot in my early design work. I worked in like 8 or 9 agencies in New York with very different like creative remits. Some of them were like huge global digital consulting companies that would build like massive website ecosystems where you'd have to, design for like 80 different devices and 400 different pages. And then other agencies where you'd be just shooting commercials for fashion brands, car brands, all sorts of stuff. So I just got exposed to probably, I don't know, dozens and dozens of different businesses, agency business models, industries, problems, types of people. And then, yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to go out on my own and start an agency. And I can get into that detail and get into the details of that story however much we'd like to, but I figure it's probably not as relevant for this conversation. But Visualize Value just came out of a bunch of iterating. It started as a agency business model and then just got more and more refined and turned into like a art passion networking project. And it's still hard to define now what it is exactly.
I appreciate that. You're a man of many, many pursuits, and definitely I just want to encourage that this is that really, really contextualizing off the rails wherever you want to take a conversation. So we don't aim to put you too systematically into a box or anything like that here. We want to get into all those sides and tributaries, even though, it does seem that VisualizeValue has found a way of systematizing lots of wonderful things that are unboxable and amorphous. But thank you for taking us all the way back to childhood. I appreciate your patience. And how, I guess, maybe you could speak to your adult self in those careers, as you mentioned. And if you feel like naming names or specific projects that you're working on that incited that, I guess love to find out what was going through your mind as you took that leap from your own personal pursuits into VisualizeValue under this brand and umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the agency environment is really interesting one for a number of reasons. I think the breadth of challenges it exposes you to is really interesting, and the feedback that I constantly got, and I even got this at university, was you have to kind of adapt yourself to the aesthetic of the company or the brand that you're working for at the time. And for certain brands, I just found that incredibly difficult. It's there's you have an aesthetic sensibility or a style or a way of thinking about things that doesn't necessarily translate to every other application in the world. So there were things that things that I was good at and things that I just did not jive with at all. And just moving around the agency world was enlightening in many ways. I think what led me to start my own thing was it takes you probably a decade to understand, or it took me a decade, I should say. Probably a lot of people smarter than me figure it out faster than this, but it took me a decade to basically get exposed to the economics of the business, where I understood, how much an agency was charging a client for an outcome, and I could obviously calculate my share in that outcome. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm getting shortchanged here. And that was arrogant and naive at the time. I was early 20s, but I still taking that leap based on that. I think if I'm completely candid about it, that's why I did it. So I was like, I can deliver what's being delivered here for a fraction of the cost. And I'm going to go and try and do that by myself. And I think one of the things that in retrospect I realized about my agency experience, the thing that was the most satisfying was the most satisfying and the most valuable in hindsight was explaining people's problems and stories back to them in a way that helped them grasp it better. So it's almost you're listening to someone describe the problem they have, and then you distill it and describe it back to them, and you win work and build relationships based on your ability to do that. To what extent can you describe my problem better than I can? Because that's obviously going to lead you to a better prescription to fix it. And that's really where some of the Visualize Value, I think the seeds were planted, because the format of that in an agency environment is a pitch deck, right? Where you're trying to tell a really compelling narrative about how you see the story today and where you want to shift the story tomorrow. And that just that experience over and over, that was really like the thing that nobody wanted to do in those environments as well, where everybody wants to work on the project once the agency has won the project. You know, they want it in their portfolio. They want to like be able to say they interacted with this brand. And I like accidentally, I think, stumbled into the role of working on those stories. So trying to build the relationship with the client in the first place. That's kind of the unsexy part of the process to a lot of people. And that's why I think there was a lot of opportunity to excel there. It's like, you know, you're kind of the last one in the office working on the thing that needs to be ready for 8 o'clock the next morning. And then I think just over time, realizing that was the valuable part. So starting my own thing and doing the thing I love to do was tell that story. And then once you kind of convince someone, you get into kind of a commodity business on the other side of it, where you can do amazing creative work as in an agency. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not here like slandering agencies or creative people that work in those environments. Just after the thing is sold, that's when the compromises begin. So you're just constantly getting hacked down. Like, here's this idea I have, let's go and make it. And even if you get signed off on, then it goes through, 200 rounds of approval. And it's like a shadow of the thing that you wanted to create in the first place. So VisualizeValue is basically born out of that, where I'm like, I want to make the thing that tells the story, the product, the thing that I can create and put out into the world and people can experience that, versus this thing that only ever made it to like 8 people in a boardroom. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of analogies there to the work you do now. I appreciate that you found a vantage, like you were able to pull your parachute string in that way, because a lot of people, I think, you get straight out of college, you go work at an agency, it feels like you're on this path, and then your life is a series of other agencies you work for, and maybe your focus on the story, the narrative, the big picture allowed you to see your place in that narrative, which is working for agencies and being a cog in that wheel, and then also makes you a prime suspect for Web3 liftoff and taking these matters into your own hands. And I think applying that skill that you so sharpened in Web 2 work, if I can even call it that. Maybe you're working on car commercials. I don't know if those are necessarily Web 2. Those are maybe terrestrial television.
Definitely these agencies like built their reputations and their businesses off the rise of the internet, for sure. The ones I work for anyway.
Yeah, I think you found that kind of like that just opportunity to even work at these agencies, because it felt like maybe a bit more Mad Men style, specific kind of fine-tuned work, and now it's just proliferated in crazy ways, right? Everyone's working on multiple trailers for every possible who and whatnot. And now that work is just so kind of ominously maybe undirected or just over-directed, depending how you look at it.
Right.
And you're now into this new, I feel like brand new paradigm where Web3 needs narrative, it needs storytelling, and and at least our eyes at Foundation have become one of the like sage poets of what's developing here. And I believe that obviously there's so much Web 2 application to a lot of the messaging you have, but a lot of it feels like you've kind of been bit by the bug of Web 3. And that's been so exciting to see you kind of like wield here.
Yeah, that's definitely, I appreciate the compliment, but that's definitely true. Like, there's so much about the mechanics of it that are interesting and appealing and aligned with what VisualizeValue was before I even knew what this world was, how it worked, what the infrastructure that underlied it was made up of. And Foundation is actually, like, this sounds like a paid plug here, forgive me but the idea of NFTs was introduced to me in the community I built around VisualizeValue, maybe 6 months before I made any inroads or experimented with it or understood it. And it was Foundation as a platform that I saw the first time where I was like, oh, now I get it. Like, UI of this is like, it was presented to me in a way where I began to understand it. I think someone sent me the OpenSea landing page. Like this is, I guess that would have been 2020, like mid 2020. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, but I don't see where my work would fit here. And then like, obviously the UI of Foundation helped me contextualize like, oh, I'm a creator that exists on this platform. And then OpenSea and everything else followed, and you understand all of it. But to have a product that really contextualizes where you can contribute is obviously a way to onboard people and get people to think about it way more, how they can contribute versus how they can, buy and sell stuff.
Totally. Yeah. I think that grip of kind of reaching out and touching you in the way that the design does at Foundation, I think that resonates, and it seems to be a case that is the first kind of proving ground of what Web3 is. It's like, can it be that simple? Because I think quite a few Web3 interfaces overcomplicate it because it is so technical. It is such an incredible unlock digitally for what's possible, but how to construe that into something that, not to say that we're old, but someone who's not the blistering edge of like a teenager who's going to try and figure out the newest video game, or maybe a 50-year-old guy like on his back legs of pre-retirement thinking like, oh, I want to get a new digital camera or something. This can be a part of people who maybe don't even consider themselves creators. And I think I want to move to that. I definitely want to also specify this is not a paid advertisement for Foundation. Yeah. We did just, I think originally naturally connect because you were speaking about how much you enjoyed using it, and I was like, oh wow, you're doing quite well. And I think to our simplicity, you complement that super well with your simplicity and directness of your own message. Not to call you simple, but I think you reach out and kind of find a similar surface of universe or access that really can speak to so many people in your work. And I think maybe aside from the market and analysis, well, really story analysis is what you're describing yourself as before, kind of this soothsayer of what's really at the vein of a project or a problem. And then in I think Web3, that's become a market. The market is kind of the problem, or the context, or the community can be, the focus point to magnify your lens of review on. How do you find yourself like balancing that line of being kind of, I would say, like an agent of the market or brand and so on, all these ways in which you carry yourself in VisualizeValue, and an artist at the same time, a creator? How do you navigate? How do you negotiate those two things in your life?
It's honestly, it's an interesting one. It's like I described at the beginning, like I never thought of myself as an artist, like maybe definitely a designer, like in the world of being presented with a problem and presenting a solution that solves that problem or contributes to solving that problem. Like that's the process of design. And the agency mindset of like constantly making work for other people, I think prevents you from realizing that about yourself, right? That you are an artist. Like a designer in 90% of cases is just paid to solve other people's problems, and more often than not doesn't even have the time or the opportunity to branch out by themselves. So it's definitely an interesting thing, and I did not know what to expect when I jumped into it. But just to like go above the question for a second, I think to me, like the canvas is a network. In Web3, the canvas is a network, and VisualizeValue existed as a network before I knew about this technology. And I think the art in this case is kind of a filter for people to join the network. And it's not necessarily, you don't need to purchase it in order to be part of the network. You can if you like, but like this whole process has given me a different appreciation and understanding of what art is. Like your ability to distill your point of view and put that out as a magnet to attract people that either share your philosophy or can contribute to your philosophy or challenge your philosophy. There's if the network doesn't form, and to your like the word market, I think is kind of maybe not a perfect synonym, but definitely there's like overlap there. Networks and markets, and we live, you know, I personally I spend a lot of my time on the internet, and the people that I've been in contact with, connected with, building things for and with over the last 2 or 3 years, I think gave me a perspective on networks that let me like transition into this world in a pretty seamless way. It's like infrastructure to continue doing what I was already doing. I think that's like that's a little bit of a misconception where and I think an overblown promise in Web3, just because you're an artist and you take your work from this platform to that platform does not mean you're like 100x financial success awaits you, right? The idea is you are able to assign provenance to these pieces of art that are representative of the network you're building, and that's been true of VisualizeValue before Web3, before I knew what foundation was, before I knew what NFT is. And I think that like the dissipation of like, oh, am I an artist? Am I a designer? Am I do I work at an agency? Am I a teacher? Am I this? It's like, no, I just make stuff that is interesting to me, that has proven over time to attract people into my, into the perimeter of where I spend my time, that I love spending time with, build things with, have similar questions about the technology. So yeah, it's like it's just an exercise in growing that network, and constantly using I think another like accidental advantage I've had is VisualizeValue has been this filter where I can just pass my curiosity through it. So if I'm learning something, or if I'm curious about something, or if I'm experimenting with something, I can distill the realization that I had into a piece of art and put that out, and that has, this huge butterfly effect over time.
I appreciate that. And I love that you found, I think these words are kind of ambiguous to an extent, but I really appreciate the level of, I don't know, kind of review we can give them, because who better, like when are you going to find a time to do it, if not when you're kind of together publicly on Twitter Spaces? But it seems in foundations like dialogue and language, we often use the phrase like destination. And I sense that VisualizeValue has become a destination for you to park those questions, to try to comprehend those solutions. And even better, it's not just a destination, it's you and a couple pals around with beers kind of coming to this. It's expanded into something that's tangible and growing and inclusive. And I think that's so wonderful, and very much speaks to like the profits of Web3 that you've kind of led to and become yourself. I think market has this kind of, it definitely leans more into foundations reference because there is an exchange going, but I think we use that more like a bazaar sort of reference, like where a market in a town can be the center place of where, yes, goods are being exchanged, and why not have NFTs be a part of that, but also a community is gathering and there's an interchange of ideas. And I love networks. I think that they're all kind of examples of networks. What maybe we find ourselves in is like how these certain destinations grow.
Can you hear me? Did I get knocked off? Hello? Did we lose Charles? Hello?
That keeps me but I've not found a way to not allow phone calls and be on Twitter Spaces. Apologies. But in the meantime, like I did want to just speak to like how do you separate yourself from that network, from that incredible multitude that you're plugged into and create and design or kind of find your time? Does it happen all at once? Are you sensing like, oh, a conversation will be happening in a Discord channel, and then you'll pull that into a visualized value project or NFT or ideation, or are you kind of setting time aside for yourself? What's your creative process? I know, we use the word artist and creator lightly in your context, but how do you find that space, or how do you make your like practice?
I think there's a couple of different inputs. The Discord example is a very like you've described what has happened a number of times. Like there'll be a conversation happening in Discord or with someone individually where you just like arrive at a new point or a new way to look at something, a new way to distill something, or somebody comes to you with a question or vice versa, and you can provide a reframe or a reference or something that helps them see something in a new way, which is what Visualize Value has been about since it began. And that obviously leads to the process of creating something. I think what's maybe not completely unique about Visualize Value, the output of Visualize Value at least, but it's not labor intensive work. It's like mentally intensive work where you can almost construct 99% of the thing in your head and even iterate on the way it's displayed in your head. And then it's just a matter of like opening Figma for 15 seconds and putting the shapes where they need to be. And that's like, I think it's a hard thing to remember, but it's also a very powerful thing where you can just, be walking outside for an hour or take a shower or something, and something just pops in your head. It's not like you have to like fire up the render farm for 5 days and have some, insane output to represent that idea. The process of distillation happens like that is the process, and then the production is like really, not an afterthought, but it's a very very small part of the amount of time that represents the idea coming to fruition. So I think it's a combination of conversations and then also experimenting and playing around with the technology and listening to how the world is, just kind of listening to the broader community and environment and reflecting on that, combining that with like actually using the technology. That's another thing I think has definitely, if I were to speculate, has led to some of the success of Visualize Value, where the commentary on the space itself has resonated quite deeply with people who are invested in the space. So it's not like you're taking, an image that you made 10 years ago that may be beautiful and interesting and amazing and just putting it on a new medium. You are using the medium to, create art that represents a commentary on the medium, which I think is, at its nascent stage. If you think about what's going to be interesting or look back on as a part of the narrative forming and helping people understand this new way of thinking about art, to me, that's a contribution that I'm proud of and want to keep, thinking that way and putting work out that represents what we're all building and trying to figure out together.
I love that. And I think that meta kind of context, be it like meta upon the metaverse, of you self-referencing or referencing the trial and journey of all of us together is like you say, super resonant, and it feels like people kind of eat it up. It's something that they're hungry for, because I think in any young kind of community or DIY scene, as it might have felt in 2020 when everyone was coming together and lots of media attention was there, but the people actually functionally lifting it and speaking about it from the inside was quite few. You really found your voice, or we found your voice so valuable, and it seemed to become quite valuable to you too. I gotta ask. Sorry. First, I'll take a break and say welcome to everyone who's joined. We're about halfway in to what I assume will be a 60-minute conversation, because there's just so much to get to with Jack, who's just one of the greatest foundation creators to play across so many sides of the Web3 world, and your rapport and pursuits know no ends. This is New Arrivals. We meet weekly to talk with incredible characters in the community, and I'm Charles. Check out Foundation.app, check out Jack's work. VisualizeValue's account on Foundation is super fertile and ripe. And I use that word play because you mentioned it just a minute ago. It really does feel like amidst the conversation you're having about this, that, or the other, whatever learnings or seeings you have in the space, that you're quite playful about it as well. It feels like jovial. It feels like there's a sense of humor, and like it isn't as depressing as like some memes or just outright hilarious. You find this combination of astute reveling upon like what's happening, and then you also are able to do so with a smile on your face or make it entertaining. What is the final point? Can you describe, like, I think that work in agency and design and so many industries is really crucial. When you're at the press mint or at the let's wrap it up, folks, let's ship it stage, can you just describe where that play takes you? Do you have like a ritual for when something's finally done and you can ship it? Are you iterative? Do you delete things? Do you publish things and bring them back? How is your process of like finalizing things? Because I'd love to learn, and I think everyone else here is looking for insight on how anyone of your magnitude does it.
I think it's not a one-to-one every time. There are definitely some just instinctual calls where you just feel like, okay, I have to get this out from especially the commentary on the space itself, when it's informed by timing and culture and the thing that's being discussed in that moment. That feels to me like I want to mint that as closely to the time when I had the realization as possible. And like the format of VisualizeValue has always allowed me to do this, where I'm not releasing bodies of work that take 12 months to build. And I fight myself on this all the time. Just like, can I just sit down and like, turn the internet off and spend 6 months making something like, a collection of scale that is this massive commentary on, I don't even know what, but allow myself to get into a situation to build something like that. And I think, I don't want to rule it out, but it's like, I know what helps me keep momentum, keeps me consistent and creative, and it is not that. And that might be because I've never done it before. I haven't got the discipline to do that. But getting the thing out of the way so you can start working on the next thing is probably the closest I can get to describing it. And a lot of the lessons that I've learned really come back to this idea of the internet as a canvas is very forgiving. So the things that don't do well or things that don't resonate just disappear forever. And the things that do really well obviously get picked up and shared and networked. And I think that's a really hard thing for people to realize or wrap their head around, because we're like, we're very different creatures than that. We're like, I've heard it described in the past as we're linear creatures living in an exponential world. If you spend a majority of your time or a good amount of your time on the internet, I think that statement resonates with most people, where, the things that you would do, even in a working environment like an agency, it's very hard to condition yourself, I think, to just like push out ideas if some of them fall flat. But that's really, that is the creative process. And I think part of the like longer game of VisualizeValue is I want people to see stuff fail. I want people to see that like not everything that goes out is a smash hit, because that's just the nature of the beast, right? There's a million examples of that, of people that are incredibly high profile, where I think it's Miles Davis, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, is like for every chart hit that he ever produced, he had 200 B-sides. It's you can't really predict how things are going to do, and there's definitely there's definitely almost a correlation inversely sometimes, where you just have this like idea that's come to you over time. You don't know where it's come from. Like I'm just going to get it out, and it just takes off. It's like the amount of hard work in inverted commas that goes into a piece of work, I don't think is correlated with the way the market receives it. And that's a very hard thing for people to come to terms with, because a lot of us obviously grew up with that as the model. And the internet has just completely shifted us away from the way our bodies operate versus the way the network receives and propels the work.
Right. Yeah, I think it's probably blown the doors wide open on a lot of those like maybe constants that we predicted in the past. And I've kind of two follow-up questions to that before we get into more your work within it and individual stuff. But when people come to you, I think as well, they see your success in the space, and they also see your eye for success. Like you're commenting on success, even just now, right? You're saying like, if you want to succeed, you have to fail a few times. You have to make mistakes. You have to kind of like come through the gauntlet. How often and how would you give advice to someone like success in this market? Because I think you're describing it as like almost unquantifiable or unpredictable. Would you say, like, if you had one attribute to kind of recommend people to find success, would it be ideation and just volume of ideas, or would it be consistency, like just pushing something over and over again until it clicks? What kind of, where do you, if you could, I know this is an impossible question to answer, but for the sake of today, July 7th, where would you put people's focus in terms of like how you attributed to your success, or at least where you see these things success going for the future?
I think just extrapolating from my experience before getting into this world, the thing that got me confident in even my ability to ship an idea was sitting in rooms with people and showing them things where they'd be like, oh, I understand that. And it's like you have to produce something and get a reaction from one person, and then that thing becomes like, the internet is just a canvas that you put that on in order to seek that reaction at scale. And you only get there through like iterating relentlessly. And the first guy that gave me a job in New York, Australian guy, started a little agency called Exit Creative Company, it was called. And he was like an all-round creative dude, like art director, designer, writer, strategist, blah, blah, blah. And I came to that place thinking like, okay, this is my job description, and I just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And working in a small place like that just gave me, I think, or opened my eyes at least to the idea that I had as much creative agency as I wanted to take. And I worked with hundreds of people over my career, and some people just never seem to get that idea that like everybody's making it up as they go along. If you want to like contribute an idea, put it in front of someone, just make it and put it in front of them, send it to them, like present it in a way that they can't say no to. There's a book by a ad guy. It's called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. I forget who wrote it, but that concept of being in an environment where you just iterate constantly, because that's what agency work is. It's just, throw 1,000 ideas at the wall. Literally, you have a wall plastered in ideas. And now you have the ability to run that process in public, find the people that are interested in the things that you're interested in, and, even seek them out. Like, they exist already. I built a curriculum called the Permissionless Apprentice. It's $1. The only reason it's $1 is because if you give it away for free, nobody opens it. But you can go and find that. And that, it's definitely more of a commercial context than art. But it's about just thinking about what it is you're contributing and what the person on the other side of that, interaction gets from that thing. And I think a lot of artists just don't think that way, or that's the antithesis of art. And I don't really have an opinion about that. Like I'm expressing my point of view, but I'm also conscious of the fact that, my point of view can be helpful or useful or reframe something. So I think that idea of, there's another phrase in that course, it's called make noise and listen for signal. So you just make stuff, put stuff out, and when you get like a bite, that's where you know where to fish, right? This is like applying the laws of commerce to art, and again, this is like the taboo that nobody as a front-facing artist wants to talk about, but you can reference any artist in history or any famous quote about the idea of art and money, and it's what's the bankers get together, they talk about art. Artists get together and they talk about where to get cheap turpentine or canvases or whatever it is. So I think the commercial component of it is, heavily hinges on the reaction you can generate, and you can test that in a very iterative and like deliberate way, and then just go for scale that way. But to go back to the earlier point, like it's about network building, and like maybe, to be successful in Web3, you need to be, the art is really building networks. Like that's the discipline that you have to be great at as if you're building a platform, if you're building an art career, if you're building a tool, whatever it is you're doing, any business, any like pursuit that is native to the internet is going to depend upon your ability to grow that network. So there's way more to that than just producing images.
I love it. Yeah, I think there's probably two. If I could summarize that into 2 points that resonate with me. One is that don't take no for an answer. Get out there, make your work, put it in front of people. Don't be ignorable. And the second is like distribution, media, the kind of publishing, the outreach that you form around your work can be as important as the work. And whether you have a fancy bank with all the money in the world in it, and you have no advertising, or you go out and you advertise a very small bank to seem like it's the biggest bank in the world, all of that can be kind of attributed or extrapolated into any market, any being or kind of brand, as an independent artist, as a collaborative collective or something. And I think it's really, you show it really well in your work. I'm just going to completely recommend everyone listening, check out VisualizeValue.com. Look around at all of the wonderful resources you have there. It's just a treasure trove. I think you can kind of like dig for probably over 365 days through a good amount of like the context and lessons to learn there. And as a kind of an analog, I love how it connects to your foundation page, because certainly artists have galleries, or Shopify's, Etsy's to reach their audiences. It feels like a very good mirror in a way of what you do in your shop, store, system, network of your own, and how it connects to what you kind of like export at Foundation. Check out foundation.app. We're featuring one of Jack's collections on the homepage. Dive deep into that as well. And I think I'd love to move in the last like kind of quarter of our conversation to your specific NFT work and where you are in the space. Unless we haven't gotten into anything. I had one tiny question left, which is how important do you see Twitter, or how do you disconnect your work from Twitter, or how like valuable is Twitter? But I think maybe we could, obviously it's important. We're here speaking about it. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I just think you found your poetry in Twitter as well as the NFT medium. What kind of like, if you have any hot takes on your Twitter presence? I remember you having battles with Twitter back in the day. I thought maybe we weren't going to be able to add you today because you'd been blackballed or something.
No, hopefully I'm past those. That was those were crucial moments in the VisualizeValue story for sure.
That also became a subtext of your work in NFTs.
Indeed.
So I think like you're clearly just grabbing at all of the context and straws around your life. We can maybe keep that in mind as I ask these later questions, because I think obviously Twitter plays like very heavily into the commentary, the work, and the distribution for your work. But
yeah, I can answer that really quickly. I think Twitter is like the most analogous social network to a market, right? Like every other social platform, I mean, at least when I was getting started in this world, is way more of a closed network. It's like you opt in. Um, there's not like it's not like you're scanning the entirety of consciousness and you can like enter into these different parts of the world with Twitter. And before I knew what NFTs was, Twitter was a huge part of the strategy of growing the other parts of the Visualize Value business. I had this concept when I got started called reverse influence, where, just to tie this to the point I made in the last answer, I would take people's ideas that were way more accomplished and famous than me and add context to them and put them on Twitter and tag that person. And almost, you know, in many cases, they would share that. I would tap into their network. You know, some of the people that saw that would join my network in some capacity. So it's about understanding the landscape of networks, how they all connect to each other, and contributing in a positive way to those networks, and you will reap the benefits of those contributions over time.
Yeah, and I think you've accumulated that in the last few years, even pre Web3, where it's incredibly resourceful and necessary. I think to a lot of the dialogues, or being a part of the party, as it were. I'm going to shift because I think I started off this conversation by mentioning one of the main features that Foundation has been exploring in the last few weeks has been manifold creators, and obviously you come from I think a very insightful community member within like their work. How have you kind of come around to manifold contracts originally, or kind of how do you experience them within your toolkit? Because now, as you're aware, everyone listening, Foundation has manifold contracts in our ecosystem. The creators, the minting at Manifold can be in the Foundation listing and marketplace like pretty automatically. Just wondering like your insights on Manifold and how you look at those contracts in your work.
Yeah, for me, I mean, there's a couple cool little features here, and I'm like, I've put one collection on Manifold. So I actually did that before, I believe, before it was possible to mint a collection on Foundation under your own token. So that would have been, I don't know when that pushed live, but since then I've created collections natively on Foundation. But Manifold, yeah, just the ability to like port a collection across platforms initially was a thing that was incredibly appealing. The counterpoint is the Foundation, like the distribution and the marketplace built in was far more appropriate for some of the types of work I was doing. The Manifold stuff, the collection that I minted was a brand project that had to kind of live all together and port itself across all these different platforms. So took a little bit of a different approach with that. But to be completely transparent, the evolution of Manifold since I minted that work, I'm not sure of what else has been added there. So I've been minting on Foundation since then.
Right. And I think that's just like a really good allusion to the diversity and offerings out there. And I kind of just want to underline that we see this as a really big opening of the doors. I think people, kind of sometimes equivocate markets or destinations or networks to being like kind of islands. And we really see that benefit with Web3 is that there's so much interconnectivity and so much composability between what goes on, and really excited to have, eventually like all NFTs, all work that falls within your career hosted here, because it's been so magnanimous and incredible to have like in the individual phases as you've so far built it. So appreciate having the cyber contract here. It's a part of your provenance, and looking forward to seeing how that all develops. I kind of want to specifically speak to how you look at the kind of, I think you started a lot of your Foundation work with these packs, right? Like these ways to fall deeper into the rabbit hole of Visualize Value, because obviously you have this membership in a way, be it subscriptions or products or community involvement that exists. How do you how do you attribute the success of your work to that? Like, because I think it kind of was the pre conception of what I think a lot of people have found with avatars, right? Belonging to a community, getting the sense
Yeah.
of identity, and then of course, like right afterwards, where's the utility? Like where's the function of being here,
Right.
and what do I
Right.
get out of it? And I think like you actually kind of reverse engineered that. You started with function. Everything felt like definitely there was an aesthetic just pleasure to your work, but also that there was a deepness and yeah, something to dive into. How did you kind of sense that, or how important does that feel to your future? How do you kind of like make all of that work in your system now?
Yeah, I'm very glad that like none of the work was ever um, sold with a promise of some like fantastical, 10-year vision of the utility of owning this thing. It's a just another node in the network of things that make up visualized value. So I my my I guess my longer term view of the space is that this is a like another way to express the value of the network, and it's in such a nascent stage that it this can't be the only entry point into the visualized value network, nor should it be, because part of what we're trying to do here is to help people understand the opportunity that exists on the internet. And if you're limiting that to only people who can, one, like use the tools in Web3, load up a wallet with Ethereum, buy Ethereum, can afford to buy, pieces of work, that's not really like you're limiting the impact of your work by orders of magnitude. If you can grow a network of, if your work resonates with enough people that you can grow a network of 1 million people, 2 million people, 5 million people, you don't need to charge every single person. Every single person in that network doesn't need to buy a piece of your art for you to be, um, for you to sustain whatever it is you're doing. So I think that like not having that pressure or not having to promise those things has really contributed to the quality of the work and the ability to just focus on um, the same things that made visualized value successful in the first place. Like the people that want to contribute or be a part of the network in a much deeper way by buying and holding onto these unique pieces of digital art, they like I have a relationship with 90% of those people before I even knew what an NFT was. So that's a really like different way of thinking about it, I think. And the the idea that the technology automatically qualifies you to be a network builder or produce things that are interesting to lots of people, that's a myth that I would very much like to dispel. There's definitely little cool things you can do with NFTs, but they're not like, we're not at a stage where enough people are competent at understanding that to offer something that is, you know, I'm going to be careful what I say because there are definitely interesting experiments happening, but there's like the relationship you have with someone, like an NFT is not going to 100x the quality of that relationship, right? Just that's just not like, think about it from a different perspective where the technology just enables a deeper connection or investment in your ability to grow a network. And some of the people that have collected the work have just like given me the explanation that they're like, I know you know how to like use this philosophy to grow this network exponentially over time, and that's something I believe in, and I want to support that. That's like they're either like interested in supporting the amplification of the principles that Visualize Value talks about, or they're speculating on the fact that that network's going to get 100 times bigger in 10 years. And that's how I see it.
I love that. Yeah, I think it really speaks to that multi-dimensional windfall of opportunity amidst it. And I think it's so cool that you're able to pick up on those threads, really, which at the time you do. I think they're always threads. It might have been like Wall Street Journal or someone we were first interacting with, like, hey, look at this kind of nascent potential in a brand that's coming into our ecosystem and thinking about this stuff. Like, how can we advise or how can we steer them? And the fact that your answer is to network, not just as an individual, like at a cocktail party wearing a little name marker on you, but to go and build what I believe is like, one of the first Web3 employment hubs in amidst all of your many projects, which just feel like they're snowballing into something and have that momentum to do so. It's just really fantastic. I feel like we didn't have enough time to get into all those. I think if anything is true, it's that we should have done this sooner, and it's been too long, and now we have too much to catch up about. But yeah, I think as we near the hour mark, I really love to make sure we don't take up all your time today, and also offer that if there's anything you felt like we didn't get to speak about, or anything that maybe words of wisdom that you want to pass on to anyone listening in, if we didn't touch upon a specific reference, you had a chance to do so in the last few minutes. If you don't have anything, that's great. I can sign us off, but I just want to make sure that you kind of got your open mic moment here, because you just have so much to add, and we really appreciate all your insight.
Yeah, I would ramble for 10 minutes, a bunch of disconnected thoughts, but I think the thing I would love to emphasize is this idea of network building and sustainable network building. So if you're in the you're in a place where you're trying to get more people interested in what you're doing, you have to think about it from the principles of like what builds and sustains a network. And as we've seen over the past 6 months, number go up is not a strategy, right? And like the hype machine that can get caught up around the work you're doing can actually be a detractor to your success over the long term. So having 10,000 people shouting at you about like the fact that you haven't like made lunch boxes with pictures on it yet is not how you produce your best work as an artist. I think you will be successful in, you can add any technology to a network that people value and give them a better experience that way. That you have to get past. Maybe there are a few examples of people that are just, I don't know how they do it, but they just wake up and they make stuff and people buy it for millions of dollars. I don't know how they do that. That's not how I do things. I think the idea of like honing in on one great relationship you have and thinking about how you can bring more people into that network. So I did an illustration of this, like you should be thinking about, if you think of a network as nodes and lines connecting the nodes, right? That's how we visualize networks. You should be focused on those lines that connect the nodes. What can you do to increase the quality of that relationship between person X and Y that is in your network? And for the most part, VisualizeValue has created these butterfly effects between members of the network that may not even have a relationship with me to the same degree. So it's like you've built this thing that has attracted people that are then able to build things together, get together in person. It's just, I think it's a very different way of thinking about it. And that's how I would advise people to approach it. If they're struggling or starting from scratch, that's a better lens, I think.
Huge, and I think really ambitious words to leave us with.
Do we lose him? Right on time. Hello?
Hey, sorry, I'm back now. I got a phone call and it wouldn't let me stop. Humongous advice, ambitious, incredible, and so valuable, I think, to use your namesake. Nonetheless, visualize value in your network rather than just like who you are and what your work is, and connect beyond. I really appreciate like all the effects and the value you've brought to our community. It's been a real honor to be in existence along the same timeline and journey together. And yeah, I just feel so lucky that like Foundation and VisualizeValue have found so much work in between and so much more to come. So thank you for taking the time. Let's not let another year pass before we do this again. Really appreciate you walking us through it and giving us that background. Yeah, really, really incredible. Can't say enough.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks to everybody who spent their attention on the last hour on this. Much appreciated.
Yes, we have much more to get into. Save some for next time. And
Will do.
Thank you all for joining. New arrivals, I'm Charles. This is Foundation's weekly chance to speak with very valued members of our community, and there's none better than VisualizeValue Jack. Check out Foundation.app, check out VisualizeValue.com, dive deep into his collections and work. Yeah, thank you. It's been great. Can't wait to see what's coming up next. Speak soon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Cheers. Bye-bye.